When the prostrate Protestant, when the prostrate Protestant, when the prostrate Protestant goes marching in. So today we're going to get into Proto-Orthodoxy and what that means for Catholics today. So according to Bart Ehrman, who is a renowned scholar on Christianity, he refers to Proto-Orthodoxy as a set of Christian beliefs that was going to become dominant in the 4th century, held by people before the 4th century. So what he's referencing there is Constantine's conversion to Roman Catholicism, which a lot of people mistakenly believe is Christianity. Ehrman expands on the thesis of German New Testament scholar Walter Bauer, laid out in his primary work Orthodoxy and Heresy in Earliest Christianity in 1934. Now, Bauer hypothesized that the Church Fathers, most notably Eusebius, in his ecclesiastical history, had not given an objective account of the relationship of early Christian groups. Instead, he would have rewritten the history of early Christian conflicts so as to validate the victory of the Orthodox party that he himself represented. See, this is a theme that goes on into history, unfortunately. The winners always tell the story afterwards. Eusebius claimed that orthodoxy derived directly from the teachings of Jesus and his earliest followers, and had always been the majority view. By contrast, all other Christian views were branded as heresies, which is a term that modern Catholics love to use against, denominations that are against them. I mean, in particular, during the Reformation era, which we will cover later on in this episode, they talk about that a lot. Now, going back to Eusebius, bear in mind what he said. The orthodoxy was always the majority view. Now, bear in mind, in the previous episode, I was listing in historical fashion, all the early Christians, and not one of them represented the ideas that would follow the Catholics. These came out of God knows where, something of the devil, clearly, and was not in the early history of the church, clearly. So Eusebius is incorrect here when he claims that it's directly from Jesus, this, ideology he had at the time, theology, and he's viewed all the others as heresies, okay? So this is where we're at now. Now, in modern times, many non-orthodox early Christian writings were discovered by scholars, thank God, gradually challenging the traditional Eusebian narrative. Bauer was the first to suggest that what later became known as orthodoxy was originally just one out of many early Christian sects such as the Ebionites, Gnostics, which we'll get into a lot of, and Marcionists, that was able to eliminate all major opposition by the end of the 3rd century and managed to establish itself as orthodoxy at the First Council of Nicaea and subsequent ecumenical councils. Now, if anyone's familiar with Gnosticism, that denies Jesus completely, and they actually have their own set of books, which was later known as the Apocrypha. And we will get into those as well. But they are not Christian at all, because they contradict what Jesus has said. They contradict everything that Christianity is. And they have their own set of books. So this is where Catholicism is coming from, just so everyone knows. According to Bauer, the early Egyptian churches were largely Gnostic. The 2nd century churches in Asia Minor were largely Marcionist, and so on. But because the church in the city of Rome was Proto-Orthodox, in Ehrman's terms, Bart Ehrman, Bauer contended they had strategic advantages over all other sects because of their proximity to the Roman Empire's centre of control and power. Bauer claims that as the Roman political and cultural elite converted, so-called, to the locally held form of Christianity, they started exercising their authority and resources to influence the theology of other communities throughout the Roman Empire, sometimes by force. Sounds very Christian, doesn't it? Jesus said turn the other cheek, and they're literally doing the opposite of that. Bauer cites the first epistle of Clement, see, there you go, as an early example. The Bishop of Rome, interfering with the Church of Corinth, to impose his own proto-orthodox doctrine of apostolic succession, which later became as the popeship, and to favour a certain group of local church leaders over another. So what we can see here is all of what is being said about the Proto-Orthodox group, which is an early form of Catholicism, which is so clear, because they use the same language and everything. They call everyone else heretical, they call themselves the Supreme Church. As in Latin, it states that, Catholicism is a universal church, that's what it means in Latin. we can clearly see that this is not from Jesus' teachings or writings or what he actually preached. He never preached this stuff. And what they were following were other gospels, essentially.